Hi there, this is S.J. Thomason with Christian-Apologist.com. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about street epistemology, which is something that was popularized by Peter Boghossian. And Peter Boghossian in 2013 created this idea to go out and to develop relationships with people who are strangers, to ask them about their beliefs. He felt that this is a superior method to debating with others. And why it's superior to debating is when people are debating, they usually take sides and they have their fences up. Their defense is up in a way, if you want to call it that. They, a lot of times, will get into the other side's camp and consider them the enemy. So this alternative to debating is an approach that's used by people who follow Peter Boghossian, such as Anthony Magnabosco, that you see pictured here. So Anthony Magnabosco, here's a picture of his shadow right here up in the top of the screen. That's his shadow. It's what he does is he walks around college campuses and he walks around the streets and he approaches strangers and then he asks them about their beliefs. And a lot of time people might believe on faith, and he thrives on that idea of people believing on faith. So what he does in those particular situations is he starts digging in to find out why someone believes if they don't have very good evidence, according to him, for their beliefs. And so he goes around and he does that. And according to him, what he considers a win using this street epistemology approach is when he gets them to say, I don't know. Because then he figures they're going to go home and they're going to be a little bit rattled and they're going to then question their beliefs. And he wants them to dump their Christian beliefs. In fact, I just heard him this morning on a channel with T-Jump. And what he did was he was pointing out the fact that his children are very skeptical. He doesn't want his children seeing nativity scenes that his parents would want his children to see. So he doesn't want his children to develop any sort of religious belief. So clearly he's indoctrinating his children, but that's neither here nor there. This is his website. And you can see right here, his YouTube channel, you can see right here that he has a number of videos. And so what he does is not only does he go around and ask people about their beliefs, but he films them and then he posts them on YouTube. It's actually pretty interesting. So as we go down here, you can see right here some of the things. Are you being led astray? Catholic questions atheism. Quenching thirsty spirits. The wise thing to do. So it's kind of amusing. He has alternatives to street epistemology. Now, I didn't listen to that video, so I'm not sure what these alternatives are, but I'm sure they're somehow developing relationships with others. And so we can go down here, and one of the things that you'll see right here is this video called What Does a Success in Street Epistemology Look Like? Now, according to Anthony Magnabosco, as I just mentioned, I don't know is a success. He also likes to make sure that he doesn't sound condescending. He wants to come off in a positive way. He also says that he doesn't want to let his interlocutor know exactly what his own beliefs are, which are in atheism. And so I guess he's assuming the person's never watched YouTube and seen him in action. And usually from the videos I've seen, it doesn't look like it. So we're going to talk about street epistemology today, but what we're going to do is we're going to flip the script. We're going to use it from a Christian application of how we could approach atheists using their methodology. So I'm entitling this video, Flipping the Script on Atheist Street Epistemology. What I did was I found the 7 steps that street epistemologists use to share their good news, which isn't the good news at all. So we're going to use that to share the good news. So this is how I envision the street epistemologist, is a person maybe on a bike with a backpack, strap webcam or GoPro, something like that. They approach random strangers on campuses and they get them to look into their own beliefs and question themselves. So the very first step, according to the Street Epistemology Guidebook, is to build a rapport with your interlocutor. So how you do that with a Christian, from a Christian perspective, is just to develop friendships. And actually, that's a great idea. And I think it's something that can be practiced. So a lot of times people like me and other Christians will invite atheists on our channels, and then we go through and find out, how did they become an atheist? What's their story? Were they born an atheist, or were they deconverted at some point? Is it because they encountered Christians who they thought weren't exactly acting as Christians were supposed to be acting? A lot of times people feel that Christians are hypocrites, and some Christians, quite frankly, are. So a lot of times people come to their beliefs for emotional reasons. But whatever it is, you're to build this relationship. It's very important. So you build a relationship. And the next thing that you're going to want to do is identify what they claim, what their belief is. So they might say, well, I believe in a flying spaghetti monster. Of course, that's not something people are serious about, but instead what they might do is they might say, I do not believe in God. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to find out, what exactly do you mean? Are you an atheist? And if you're an atheist, what type of atheist are you? Are you a lack a belief in God atheist, which is something that's advocated by the American atheists? Or are you someone who basically says, I don't believe there is a God, which is the usual definition, the standard and the earlier definition of atheism is a person who does not have a belief in God. Or perhaps the person is an agnostic. So what an agnostic is a person who doesn't feel like they have the information, they don't have enough evidence, so they can't make a decision about whether or not God exists. Now, to me, you can look out the window and I see the general revelation in God. You could look at nature and compare our planet to any other planet within the Hubble telescope, and we can tell that we're the only planet with such immense beauty in the night skies, for example. And it's something that to me points to a very clear definition, or very clearly, there's a creator. If you look at the way the night sky looks, for example, up in the north, the aurora borealis, or some of the beautiful northern lights, it is quite clear to me that there is a source of this beauty. But anyway, so let's go back. So we're going to clarify their definitions, find out where they stand. Whatever we do, we don't want to straw man the atheist. Okay, so you don't want to misrepresent them. And I have a picture here of Kathy Newman, because what Kathy Newman did when she was interviewing with Jordan Peterson is she kept strawmanning him. So she would say things like, so you're saying, so for example, Jordan Peterson said something about the wage gap between men and women, and I think he said something about the wage gap being smaller than a lot of people seem to think. In the United States, for example, the wage gap is about 80%. So in other words, women get paid around 80 cents on the dollar to what men get paid. And that varies slightly by year. But it also, in addition to, there is a potential for some discrimination, but in a lot of cases, there is a justification for that. Women choose different types of jobs. Women might not choose to stay in the workforce as long. Women don't work as many hours as men on average. They work about 42 hours to 45, but I could go into this for a very long time. But before I do, as I'm saying this information, acting as Jordan Peterson would, what happens is then Kathy comes back and says, so you think that women shouldn't be paid as much as men? No. I'm saying that there are some reasons behind the gender wage gap. So it's actually smaller than you think. Okay, so a lot of it might have to do with choices going into the STEM fields. Again, I could go on for actually hours on this particular topic, but that is one thing that I would not want to be misrepresented by somebody coming and then saying, well, you must hate women, something like that. No, of course not. I'm a woman. Why would I hate women? So anyway, we're going to go to the next step in this process. So we're going to identify the confidence level. How confident are you in your belief in atheism? How confident are you in believing that God does not exist? So this is something you'd want to ask. How confident are you? And someone might say, well, on a scale of 1 to 100%, 100% being the most confident, I'm 75% confident. So the next thing that you'd want to do is you want to find out exactly what method they used to establish this confidence level. How did you decide 75%? Why not 50%? Why not 20%? Where do you stand on this? And a lot of times atheists like Pine Creek Doug, he's another one who uses street epistemology, will do things like they'll say, well, if you say you're 100% confident, then I can't do anything for you. It's an impossible thing. You should not be 100% confident of anything. And actually, I disagree. I feel like I am 100% confident in God, and I have good reason for it, justification and evidence. I have evidence inside the faith and outside of the faith. I have lots of evidence. And I'm going to get into that in a little while. So the seventh step is to ask questions of the atheist. And I think these are some of the best questions that you can ask an atheist. So I would ask the atheist, what is the best explanation of our origins, meaning, purpose, morality, agency-seeking nature, spirituality, and destiny? And to ask these questions, I'm going to offer some information in just a moment.
The diagnosis, the flu virus, destroyed the nerves of his vocal cords, rendering them limp. When Miller asked about his prognosis for recovery, a doctor told him 0. Despite Miller's protestations, his former Sunday school class at First Baptist Church of Houston prevailed on him to speak. A special microphone was used to amplify Miller's soft, hoarse, croaky voice, and the class agreed to endure the grating sound because of their love for him and his teaching. All right, now here's what we're going to do. At this point, we actually have audio of that Sunday school class. And I'm going to play it for you right now. It'll take just a few moments, but I want you to listen to his voice and think about the context in which this is taking place, that he's talking about texts that have to do with healing. So listen to what happened to Dwayne Miller right here and now.
So when the psalmist writes, and he heals all of my diseases, let me say to you that I believe God still heals. That hasn't ended. That is not over. Now you have to be careful on how you do this, because there are folks who carry things to an excess and it becomes a show. And God has never intended that that be what it is. God heals in his sovereign will. I don't know why God does things that he does, but I know that he does. And the only thing he requires of me is to allow him to be God and me to be me. And let it be.
Okay, now we're about to continue this, but I want you to notice his own shock at what happens and how this. I mean, he'd have to be a Hollywood actor to nail this. The surprise he seems to have at what begins to happen.
To say that every single person will always be healed because Jesus died on the cross is a misinterpretation of Scripture. Not true. Won't work. Isaiah 53 doesn't talk about physical healing. I'm sorry. That's just not the context. And to impress that there causes a misinterpretation of Scripture. That's wrong. On the other hand, to say that since we don't have anything after the book of Acts, that miracles ended at the book of Acts and they never happen again is equally as wrong. Because you have put God in a box both ways. And he doesn't want to be in the box. So the psalmist says, I'm excited. Bless the Lord, O my soul. One of his benefits is he heals all of my diseases. And then in verse 4 he says, and he redeems my life from the pit. Now I like that verse just a whole lot. I have had, and you have had in times past, pit experiences. We've all had times when our life seemed to be in a pit, in a grave. And we didn't have an answer for the pit we find ourselves in. And I don't understand this right now. I'm but overwhelmed at the moment. I'm not quite sure what to say or do.
See, this is just absolutely wonderful. So I highly encourage you to go over to Braxton's channel and listen to the rest of this. He also is going to play another miracle that I'm going to explain a little bit in just a moment. So I added an 8th step to the Street Epistemologist guidebook, and it's called Offer Your Interlocutor a Lifeline. So again, I talked about origins, meaning, morality, purpose. With respect to our origins, scientists have supported the Big Bang in cosmology, which suggests the universe has a start date of time, space, and matter. The Kalam cosmological argument goes as follows. 1, premise, conclusion. So the first premise is everything that begins to exist has a cause. The second premise is the universe, time, space, and matter, began to exist. Third, therefore, the universe has a cause. Now, if we take this to another level, we can say, well, what is this cause? The cause must be timeless or eternal, must be immaterial, and it must be transcendent to the universe. That's God. With respect to meaning and purpose, numerous global studies have found that we are all seeking purpose and a desire to do something greater than ourselves. As an example, Kinnear, Kearns, and Doutharibes in 2000 consulted the religious texts and sacred writings of 7 major world religions: Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, Judaism, and Islam. They further consulted the texts of atheism from the American Atheists, humanism, and also the United Nations, and they found some commonalities. 1, we all share a commitment to something greater than ourselves. 2, self-respect, but with humility, self-discipline, and acceptance of personal responsibility. 3, respect and caring for others, the golden rule. And 4, caring for other living things in the environment. Speaking of our morality, in addition to the study by Kinnear and colleagues that I just mentioned, we have other studies suggesting universals in values and moral imperatives. For example, Dalsgaard, Peterson, and Seligman in 2005 examined the ancient texts from 8 religious traditions and found 6 recurrent values: courage, temperance, justice, transcendence, humanity, and wisdom. Westmark in 1906 identified universals in the approval of honesty, charity, mutual aid, and generosity, along with the prohibition of theft and homicide. Henrik and colleagues in 2005 examined 15 societies, finding that fairness and trust were exhibited in all. Finally, in multiple studies of hundreds of samples in 82 countries and representing culturally diverse people of varying ages, gender, occupations, and geographics, Schwartz in 2012 found a conclusion which he found astonishing, quote unquote. After ranking 10 values in order of importance, results indicated universals in values. The vast majority ranked benevolence first, followed by universalism, which is this idea, again, of caring for others in society, the outgroups, and the environment. And that was followed by self-direction, which is in relation to the other one that Kinnear found, which was this value of taking care of yourself, being self-responsible, that sort of thing. Now, this goes in contrast to the atheist feeling that we don't have free will. I've heard atheists say that we're biologically predetermined to do anything. And I can say that we are biologically predetermined from a very low level of action. For example, we are predetermined to sleep and to eat, sure. But we're not predetermined to do things related to our self-actualization if we were to look higher on the Maslow hierarchy. We aren't predetermined to make decisions about God, for example. God has hardwired us to believe in him. However, some can choose to reject that, as is noted in Romans 1. So accordingly, the moral argument for God is as follows. 1, if humanity has universal objective moral values and obligations to do what's right, there must be a universal source of righteousness that transcends generations. 2, humanity has universal objective moral values and obligations to do what's right. And again, you can reference that study I just mentioned. 3, there is a universal source of righteousness, God. Now, some might say, a lot of times atheists at this point say, well, what about evil in the world? Why is there evil in the world? I would say there's a general revelation of beauty in the world. They would come back and respond with, there's evil in the world. What's really interesting is you look at a study called the Globe Study, which was started by Robert House, and he has a number of other colleagues, and they collected information from 62 societies around the world. And what they found is the countries with the highest level of suffering and the most pain, the highest levels of infant mortality rates, the highest levels of lack of food, shelter, that sort of thing. A lot of times these are African countries. They also have the highest levels of religiosity. In many cases, 99.9% believe in God. And what's also interesting about these particular societies is they have the highest levels of what these study authors call humane orientation, which is related to benevolence that we just mentioned a second ago. So these places with the highest level of benevolence have the highest levels of suffering. And in contrast, the places with the lowest levels of benevolence, and the lowest one actually is West Germany, have the highest levels of atheism. So it's really interesting in that particular study how that worked out. You can see a lot of the European countries in that study, especially Northern and Western European countries, tended to have very low levels of humane orientation, which again relates to benevolence, which is helping others, especially in our in-groups. Another thing that God has is he's given us this agency-seeking nature. He's hardwired us to believe in him. Why is religious belief so prevalent all over the world? We have an innate sense to assign agency in nature. Neurotheologians believe that the structure and function of the human brain predispose us to believe in God. They believe the limbic system within the brain, which is the biological center for emotion, is also the source for what some have termed God neurons and God neurotransmitters, according to Joseph in 2001. When research subjects engage in religious meditation, for example, functional MRI scans note that changes in brain activity and blood flow occur. These changes make us feel good and keep us coming back for more. In other words, prayer and meditation is something that's actually we're hardwired to do, and it makes us feel good. Another thing just to mention, and we can speak back to what Braxton Hunter pointed out with miracles, is this idea of spirituality. So Gary Habermas has been collecting a lot of data on spirituality and near-death experiences. In fact, at one point, he was a journal editor for a journal that focused on near-death experiences. So I went in and I found a journal called the Journal of Near-Death Experiences, and they've been collecting near-death experiences that have been corroborated by others since 1981. And I'll quote what their mission is. They say, the Journal of Near-Death Experiences publishes articles on near-death experiences, on the empirical after effects and theoretical implications of such events, and on related transpersonal, which is transcending the usual personal limits of space, time, and or identity, and spiritually transformative experiences. These phenomena include out-of-body experiences, deathbed visions, the experiences of dying persons, comparable experiences occurring under other circumstances, death watch or shared death experiences, after-death communication, spiritual energy, mystical experiences, and past life memories. These experiences, coupled with residual UFO experiences, paranormal experiences with ghostly aberrations, experiences reported by those who practice in the occult, and prayers answered in miraculous ways, suggest activity beyond the natural world. As an example of the latter, and this is also reported on the Braxton Hunter video that I just posted, an Illinois woman named Barbara Comiskey Snyder had been wheelchair bound and bedridden for years when doctors decided that her case was hopeless in 1981. Her hands and feet were crumpled, her lungs almost collapsed, and she couldn't see. A radio station in the Chicago area heard about her case, and hundreds began to pray for her. Suddenly, while in her bed, she heard the words, "My child, get up and walk." Her symptoms from multiple sclerosis departed from her, and she soon found herself out of her bed and walking without any of the atrophy that had plagued her for years. That night, she went to her church and walked down the aisle. The cheers began when her fellow church members recognized her and noticed she no longer required a wheelchair. This miraculous event has been corroborated by her doctors, and she is still MS-free today. Craig Keener has a book. It's entitled In Defense of Miracles, a comprehensive case for God's action in history, which I'd highly recommend. Another point is destiny. The Bible speaks to our eternal destiny, which comes from God's grace. We only need faith in him. According to John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only begotten Son, for whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. God is our immanent, which is within this universe, and transcendent, which is outside of this universe, creator. He has the power to go beyond time and to grant eternal life and everlasting love to those so desiring. The final thing that I can note is we should expect some resistance. Your interlocutor may say that he's ready to accept a deist position, but question Christianity in particular. You may then offer this argument in support of Christianity. Ask him for the best explanation of all of the minimal facts with respect to Jesus' resurrection. Roman pagans, Jews, and Christians in Jesus' time have all indicated that Jesus' tomb was found empty, and multiple sources have indicated that. Second-class women made that important discovery. In fact, Paul stated that 500 people witnessed Jesus over the next 40 days after he rose from the dead. Many biblical and extra-biblical sources have indicated that early Christians preached illegally in support of Jesus for decades, braving beatings, stonings, crucifixions, beheadings, and being burned to death. So here are the minimal facts. 1, Jesus was crucified under Pontius Pilate. 2, he suffered, died, and was buried. 3, his apostles said he rose from the grave and appeared to them multiple times over a period of days. 4, they preached for Jesus for decades, despite widespread and brutal persecution. And 5, most of his apostles were martyred for their beliefs. We have extra biblical support for the martyrdoms of Peter, James, Jesus' half-brother, and Paul. The only way to explain all of the minimal facts is that Jesus resurrected. I also listened to a video, which was a debate between Mike Licona and Matt Dillahunty, and I highly recommend you go over to that video, because what it is, at about minute 7 in this particular debate, is Mike Licona offers a lot of information with respect to things such as paranormal activity and some of the support that he has found through the years for those sorts of activities. So it's a very interesting video. I highly recommend it. And I just want to say thank you so much for listening today. Please like and subscribe, and do come again. This is Christian-Apologist.com. And again, this is Stephanie Thomason. Bye-bye.